Absolutely, I agree with Harry, and it's actually a good thing to hear him say what he's just said. But there is a problem, and the problem is not Harry. I think the problem is the media and the British public. Let me make something very clear to you. In this interview has actually not aired yet, so we do not know the full context of what Harry had said. Even with the little clip you've just shown, Harry did not specify what sort of cancer his dad has. He did not tell us any treatment. He did not tell us his father was suffering. He basically let it like just a simple statement, I love my family. You know, he's happy to come and support his family, yet we are still crucifying him. It is absolutely terrible. We need to get our knees off the necks of Harry and Meghan and their children. Let them breathe. We are killing them. It is enough.
Belinda.
Let me give you another example. William, a few days after his dad's diagnosis was made public, William attended an event for the air ambulance, which he is a patron of, and he said the same thing. Thank you, everybody, for supporting my family. Nobody crucified him. William didn't say, no, it is a private matter, don't talk to me. He basically said, thank you for your support. And that is exactly what Harry has done.
Janet,
yes, we are trying to kill it.
Janet, I just want you to breathe a minute so Belinda can get a response in, because you've got valid comments there.
Listen, I understand your question. I think the language you use is quite extreme. I don't think we've got the foot on the necks of Harry and Meghan at all. Nobody forced them to go on their worldwide privacy tour and pretty much sell everything they could on their royal family. They're very privileged, very rich couple who've enjoyed living off the family name, and now it's coming to an end. They're distancing themselves. I think Harry also wants back in because it gives him more currency for future books and Netflix episodes.
I totally disagree with you. I totally disagree with you. And the reason is because you will never be as royal as Harry.
I don't want to be. I think it's a really tough life.
No. You make it sound like you are related to him. You know everything he's going through. You know every in and out of the royal family. You absolutely don't. You are going off what people. You make it seem like Harry is.
Belinda, I don't. Belinda and I have already said we don't. Janet,
the royal family.
It's a conversation.
They talk through the back
Janet,
door.
thank you for your call.
So, can we just take a collective breath after that? Thank you, Janet. Because what we just witnessed was not just a random caller phoning into a UK panel show. That was a citizen stepping into the arena and saying, hold on, the math is not mathing. Janet did not call in to whisper. She did not call in to politely nod along with whatever the panel was saying. She called in to challenge something very specific. The way the British media frames everything that comes out of Prince Harry's mouth. And the part that makes this moment iconic? She did it calmly at first, logically, methodically. She came prepared with actual points, actual comparisons, actual evidence of inconsistency. And only when she was dismissed did the temperature rise. Let's unpack this properly, because this wasn't chaos for chaos's sake. This wasn't someone calling in just to rant. This was about fairness. This was about someone finally saying out loud what millions of people have been thinking while watching coverage of Prince Harry. Why are we treating identical behavior so differently depending on which brother does it? First of all, context, because context is everything in this situation. We're talking about comments made by Prince Harry regarding his father's cancer diagnosis. King Charles had announced his diagnosis, and the media was analyzing every single word that came from anyone in the royal orbit. And here's the key detail Janet pointed out that somehow got completely lost in the outrage machine. The full interview had not even aired yet. Read that again. Process that. The media reaction machine was already running at full speed based on a clip, a snippet, a teaser, not the full context, not the complete interview, not even half the conversation. A clip. In that clip, Harry did not disclose medical specifics, he did not describe treatment plans, he did not give private details about his father's condition, he did not violate any confidentiality or medical privacy. He made a simple, human statement. He said he loves his family. He said he's supportive. He expressed care and concern. That's it. No charts, no confidential hospital notes, no dramatic revelations, no medical terminology, no intimate family details. Just basic humanity, basic decency, the kind of thing any son might say about a father facing illness. And yet somehow, we are told this is scandalous, this is inappropriate, this is Harry using his father's illness for publicity. Janet's point was surgical. If the interview hasn't even aired, how are we already convicting him? How are headlines forming definitive opinions before full context is even available? That's not analysis. That's not journalism. That's not media criticism. That's pre-written narrative. That's a story that was written before the facts were even available. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Janet brought up something that no one on that panel really wanted to sit with, something that makes the double standard so glaring it's almost uncomfortable to acknowledge. After King Charles's diagnosis became public, Prince William attended an air ambulance event. At that event, he thanked people for their kind words and for supporting his family during this difficult time. And you know what the reaction was? It was received as dignified, appropriate, graceful, perfectly pitched. Nobody accused him of leveraging his father's illness for relevance. Nobody suggested he was setting up future book chapters. Nobody implied he was monetizing his father's cancer diagnosis. Nobody questioned his motives. Nobody wrote think pieces about whether it was appropriate for him to publicly acknowledge his father's health situation. He was simply seen as a son doing what sons do, expressing care, accepting support, acknowledging a difficult family situation. Same behavior, same situation, same father with the same diagnosis. Different son. Very different interpretation. That's the inconsistency Janet was highlighting. That's the double standard she was calling out. It immediately shifted to character judgments about Harry's past, about his choices, about his decisions to step back from royal duties, about his complaining. That's not debate. That's not engaging with the argument. That's deflection. When you can't address the substance of someone's point, you attack their credibility, you change the subject, you redirect. Then we heard it, the line that gets pulled out like a preloaded soundbite every single time Harry is discussed. The worldwide privacy tour. That phrase has become a meme at this point, a shorthand, a way to reduce complex choices and nuanced decisions into a dismissive punchline. Let's actually talk about what that phrase is referencing and why it's intellectually dishonest. Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, stepped back from working royal duties in 2020. They moved to North America, they built a life outside the institution. And yes, they then told their version of events through various media projects. The Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, Harry's memoir, Spare. You can disagree with those choices. You can critique their approach. You can think they shared too much, or that some details should have remained private. That's all fair game for discussion. But here's the intellectual leap that keeps happening, and it's a dishonest one. Telling your story equals forfeiting the right to any boundaries ever again. That's the unspoken rule being applied here. The logic goes, you did interviews, therefore you can never complain about invasion of privacy. You wrote a book, therefore every aspect of your life is now fair game. You spoke publicly, therefore you have no right to control any narrative about yourself or your family ever again. That's not how privacy works. That's not how consent works. That's not how boundaries work. Privacy is not an all-or-nothing proposition. You can share some things and want other things kept private. You can tell your own story on your own terms and still object to lies being told about you. You can do a documentary and still not want photographers following your children. These things are not contradictory. But the privacy tour framing suggests they are. It suggests hypocrisy where there isn't any. It creates a gotcha narrative that collapses under any serious examination. And Janet was pushing back against that lazy framing. Let's map out the impossible situation that Harry and Meghan are placed in, because Janet's frustration comes from watching this play out over and over. If they talk, they're exploiting their royal connection. If they stay silent, they're cold and disconnected. If they visit family, it's strategic positioning for future projects. If they don't visit, it's abandonment and cruelty. If they defend themselves, they're whining. If they ignore attacks, the attacks are treated as confirmed truth. If they do paid work, they're cashing in on their titles. If they don't work, they're lazy and privileged. If they're photographed, they clearly called the paparazzi. If they're not photographed, they're irrelevant. Do you see the pattern? Do you see the no-win scenario being constructed? That's not balanced criticism. That's not holding public figures accountable. That's a narrative loop designed to ensure that no matter what they do, it will be interpreted negatively. And Janet wasn't saying Harry is flawless. She wasn't saying he's above criticism. She wasn't demanding everyone worship him. She was saying the response is disproportionate. The standards applied to him are different from those applied to others, and that's worth pointing out. That is a crucial distinction that kept getting lost in the panel's response.
Now let's address the moment that had everyone clutching their teacups and sharing the clip across social media. Janet, I just want you to breathe. Interesting choice of words. Very interesting framing. Notice how quickly passion gets reframed as instability. Janet wasn't screaming incoherently. She wasn't making personal attacks. She wasn't being abusive or threatening. She was making structured arguments. She was drawing specific comparisons. She was pointing out documented inconsistencies in coverage. But once her energy rose, once her voice carried the emotion of someone who's watched this pattern repeat for years, the framing became about her tone instead of her substance. That's a classic broadcast pivot, and it happens all the time, especially on call-in shows. Shift attention from the argument to the delivery, make it about the caller's emotional state rather than the validity of their points, suggest they need to calm down or breathe rather than engage with what they're actually saying. It's a way of dismissing without having to address. It's a way of suggesting that passion equals irrationality. And it happens constantly, especially when callers challenge the dominant angle of the panel, especially when someone from regular life pushes back against media professionals who are used to controlling the narrative. The subtext of "just breathe, Janet" is "you're too emotional to be taken seriously right now." But emotion doesn't invalidate argument. Caring deeply about fairness doesn't make your points less valid. And then what happened? As soon as the exchange became genuinely uncomfortable, as soon as Janet wasn't backing down, we got the classic wrap-up line. "Janet, thank you for your call. Moving on." One of the most revealing parts of that entire exchange was the suggestion that Harry wants more currency for future books or Netflix projects. Think about that claim for a second. Really sit with what that implies. It assumes that every public statement Harry makes is transactional, that every action is strategic branding, that every word he speaks is calculated for future commercial value, that even acknowledging his own father's cancer diagnosis is somehow a chess move for financial gain. That level of suspicion is intense. That level of cynicism is profound. And here's what makes it even starker. When other members of the family speak publicly about the same situation, their statements are taken at face value. When William thanks people for their support regarding his father's illness, no one suggests he's building currency for future projects. When other royals express concern or gratitude, no one analyzes it through a profit motive lens. Why is one son granted the benefit of sincerity while the other is permanently analyzed through a commercial calculation framework? What is that based on? What evidence supports that interpretation? The answer, of course, is that it's not based on evidence. It's based on pre-existing narrative. It's based on a story that's already been written about who Harry is and what his motives must be. And that's what Janet's frustration comes from, watching that pattern repeat over and over, watching assumptions treated as facts, watching motives assigned without evidence.
We also need to zoom out and look at the bigger structural picture here, because this isn't just about one family or one interview or one panel discussion. The British monarchy, currently led by King Charles, operates within a long-standing relationship with the British press. It's a complex ecosystem built on access, coverage, tradition, and mutual benefit. The royals provide content, events, photos, stories. The press provides coverage, which maintains public interest and, by extension, public support for the institution. It's symbiotic. It's been that way for generations. When Harry stepped away from that ecosystem, the relationship fundamentally shifted. He is no longer operating inside the same structure. He's outside of it. He's no longer providing the kind of access that system relies on. He's no longer playing by the unwritten rules of engagement. And when someone leaves a system but remains globally recognizable, narratives tend to harden. That's not conspiracy, that's just power dynamics. That's how institutions respond to people who exit but maintain influence. Harry still has a platform, he still has an audience, he still commands attention, but he's no longer controllable in the same way. And I think, whether consciously or unconsciously, Janet was calling attention to that dynamic. She was pointing out that the coverage isn't neutral, that there are interests at play, that what we're watching isn't just objective journalism, but a complex negotiation of power, access, and narrative control. Let's be honest about something. People didn't share this clip across social media just because it was loud or dramatic. They shared it because it felt real. It felt unscripted. It felt like someone at home watching this coverage, feeling frustrated by the same patterns, noticing the same double standards, finally got through to the studio and said out loud what millions have been thinking. Stop pretending this is balanced. Stop pretending this is fair. Stop pretending you're applying the same standards to everyone. That kind of authenticity cuts through polished talking points like a knife through butter. And you can see it in the panel's reaction. They were not expecting resistance that specific. They were not expecting comparisons that pointed. They were not expecting someone who'd clearly been paying close attention and could cite examples. Janet wasn't vague. She referenced specific timing. The interview hadn't aired. She referenced specific comparisons, William's similar public comments. She referenced specific public reaction, the different framing of identical behavior. That's why this wasn't just noise. That's why this wasn't just an angry caller. This was someone making an actual argument that the panel couldn't easily dismiss. So they had to dismiss her instead, hence just breathe, Janet, hence the quick wrap-up. This moment isn't just about Harry or Janet or one panel show. It's about something much bigger, how narratives form in real time in our current media environment. Here's the pattern we see over and over. Clips circulate before full interviews air, headlines shape perception before context is available, panels debate speculation as if it's established fact, social media amplifies the most extreme interpretations, and then when someone questions the structure, when someone points out the gaps between what was actually said and how it's being framed, they're labeled extreme, emotional, biased. We see this pattern with political coverage. We see it with celebrity coverage. We see it with any high-profile figure who generates engagement. The outrage comes first, the context comes later, and by the time full context arrives, the narrative is already set. Janet was essentially saying, can we wait for the actual full interview before deciding it's scandalous? Can we apply the same interpretive framework to both brothers? Can we at least acknowledge when we're being inconsistent? Those are reasonable asks. Those are the bare minimum for fair coverage. And the fact that making those asks gets you labeled as too emotional or biased tells you everything about how defensive the system gets when challenged. Strip away all the titles, strip away all the drama, strip away all the institutional politics and media dynamics. At the center of this specific story is a father dealing with a cancer diagnosis, two adult sons navigating their relationship with that father and with each other, and a family working through complicated history while the entire world watches and projects their own feelings onto the situation. When Harry says, "I love my family," in response to news about his father's health, that shouldn't be controversial. That should be the most normal, human, understandable response possible. When he expresses support or concern, that shouldn't require layers of interpretation about ulterior motives.
That should be taken at face value as what any son might feel and say. And if you're going to criticize, if you genuinely believe there's something worth critiquing in how he's handled things, then at least criticize based on what was actually said, not what you imagine was said, not what fits your pre-existing narrative, not what generates the most engagement on social media. What was actually said. That's Janet's core argument, and it's hard to refute without resorting to deflection, character attacks, or changing the subject. So yes, archive this clip, save it, share it. Not because Janet was perfect, not because she delivered a flawless TED Talk, not because every single word she said was unassailable, but because she represented something increasingly rare in live media, a refusal to accept a one-directional narrative without question. She represented everyday viewers who are watching the same coverage everyone else is watching and thinking, wait, that doesn't add up. She represented the audience that media is supposedly serving, but often talks down to. You can disagree with her tone, that's fair. You can disagree with her conclusions, that's also fair. But you cannot say she didn't show up with substance. You cannot say she didn't make specific points. You cannot say she was just ranting incoherently. She made a structured argument. She drew comparisons. She pointed out inconsistencies. She challenged the framework. And the fact that the segment had to be wrapped up the moment it got genuinely uncomfortable, that tells you everything. That tells you that the challenge hit somewhere real, that it exposed something the panel didn't want to sit with. If Janet's points were so easily dismissed, why not engage with them? Why not address the double standard directly? Why not explain why William's comments were received differently than Harry's? Because those are uncomfortable questions without clean answers. Moments like this remind us that media narratives are not fixed truths handed down from on high. They are constructed, they are framed, they are reinforced through repetition. And sometimes, just sometimes, a regular person picks up the phone and pokes a hole in the script. That's not chaos, that's not disorder, that's not someone being unreasonable. That's discourse, that's civic engagement. That's what's supposed to happen in a healthy media environment. People challenging, questioning, pushing back when they see unfairness. And honestly, we need more of it. We need more Janets calling in and saying, hold on, let's think about this. We need more people refusing to accept narratives just because they're repeated loudly and often. We need more citizens holding media to account the same way media holds public figures to account. Because the alternative is a system where narratives become entrenched, where questioning is dismissed as bias, where power operates without challenge. And that's not good for anyone, regardless of how you feel about Prince Harry, the royal family, or any particular public figure. So thank you, Janet. Seriously, thank you for calling in. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for refusing to just nod along. Thank you for representing everyone who's been watching this coverage and feeling like they're taking crazy pills because the double standards are so obvious. You didn't change the panel's mind. You probably didn't change the minds of people who are already convinced Harry is terrible no matter what he does. But you did something more important. You showed that the narrative can be challenged. You showed that regular people are paying attention. You showed that inconsistency can be called out, even if the response is dismissive. That matters. For those of us who support Harry and Meghan, moments like this are validating. They remind us we're not imagining the unfairness. We're not being oversensitive. We're seeing what we're seeing. And if this resonated with you, do me a favor. Keep speaking up. Keep pointing out double standards when you see them. Keep asking for fairness. Keep refusing to accept narratives that don't make sense. Be like Janet. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want more honest, fair coverage of Harry and Meghan, subscribe to this channel.
Let's keep pushing for better, more balanced media coverage. Until next time, stay critical, stay fair, and keep questioning narratives that don't make sense. I'll see you in the next one.